Final Cut Express allows us to change the properties of video clips in images. These properties include the scale, their opacity, position, along with others. The reason we would do this is twofold. One would be that the images simply are not correct as we would like them in the video. Maybe the aspect ratio is different. Maybe the interest point is not in the location we would like. Or maybe just to add interest, we want to add some movement. So we can use Final Cut Express to make these kinds of changes. To do that, I'm going to take this image that I have already in the timeline, and if I double click it, it's going to load it into the viewer. And since my playback head is also over that image, I'm seeing it in my canvas. Now normally all you will see is that image with no other additional lines except for maybe the safe areas. In order to make some basic changes by dragging, we will need to see the wireframe. To see that wireframe, go up to your canvas and click on Image and Wireframe. Now that we've done that, we can actually take this image and drag it larger if we would like, or even smaller if there's a reason for doing that. We could rotate it, we could reposition it. Now these changes that I'm making are going to exist for the entire duration of this clip. If I scrub across my timeline, you'll see that that image is not changing any size or location. And the reason for that is I've not set any keyframes. Keyframes are points where things change. And so if I wanted to create some basic animation, I would need at least two keyframes, one at the beginning, one at the end of the clip. Now I could have additional ones if I want additional changes, but I need a minimum of two. Again, one at the beginning and one at the end of the clip. So if I'm looking to do that, just some basic motion in change in size, I'm going to make sure that I'm at the beginning of my clip. I'm going to tell it that I'm going to add a keyframe. So in the canvas, down near the bottom, there's this little button that allows us to add a motion keyframe. I'm going to go ahead and make sure my snap is on. It is, and I'm going to move to the end of that clip, and I'm going to need my other keyframe. So I'm going to click and keyframe. And if we actually take a look over in the viewer, there's a motion tab. This is where all the different controls are. Some of these we've already changed by dragging things bigger or smaller. In the rotation we can do as well, and opacity. But if I expand this window out, you will actually see that there are keyframes associated with each one of these properties. And I could change those very specifically, very exactly by typing in numeric values. But in my case, I simply want to make simple changes by dragging. So I'm going to make sure that my playback head is at the beginning of my clip at the very first keyframe. You can see that's where it's actually positioned. And I want that image to be positioned about there. And I also then want to change my ending keyframe. So I'm going to position there. I'm going to take and drag this to some new location. And you'll see that the center is changing location. I also want it to be slightly zoomed in as it does that. So not only will it move, and you can see the path of that center point, but it's also going to change size just slightly as it moves from that point. To see that effect, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this up to fit it to window, so it's as big as I can possibly fit into that window. And if I take and scrub across my timeline, you'll see that the image is moving. And you may also notice if you watch the scale, it's also changing while it moves. Not very much. We're going from about 30% to about 33%. And the reason we do that is to make it more interesting. An image that is still is somewhat boring. If we add just the slightest amount of movement, a little bit of change in size in some cases, that can make it a much more appealing video or image to watch. Now let me do that again with another image. Let's go to the next one. Now here's a case where the image, when it came into Final Cut, was not the right aspect ratio, and as a result there are some black bars at the top and bottom. So in this case we might only need to adjust the size. And if we're looking at only adjusting the size across the entire image, adding no other motion or keyframes, changing position, all we would have to do is make sure that that wireframe is being displayed. And we could just simply then drag it bigger. I'm going to have to reduce the size of this so that I can see it on the screen. Grab a hold of one of the handles in the corner and drag it to whatever is appropriate. Now with my images, they're much larger than my frame size. So when it brought it in, it was around 30% or 24%. So it is okay for me to drag these bigger. If you have small images and you drag them bigger, you're going to lack in quality in the image. So watch what you're bringing in. Bring in high quality, good size images if you're going to do any kind of scaling up. So let me go ahead and leave it at that. And if I scrub across my timeline, you'll notice that the image stays that size all the way across. Once again, if I'd like to add some animation or motion, I'm going to make sure that I'm at the beginning. I'm going to add a keyframe at the very beginning. I'm also then going to move to the end of this clip. I've moved right to my edit line. I'm going to hit the left arrow one time to get to the end of this particular image. And I want a keyframe there as well. So now that I'm positioned at that keyframe, I'm going to go ahead and drag this to a different location. I'm also going to do a slight zoom in doing that. And if I check it out by scrubbing, you'll see that it is moving. And actually what I'm going to do, a little bit more natural for that airplane to be, whoops, I actually had another keyframe there. Let me make sure I am positioned on the right keyframe. All right, that's better. Now when this goes and moves, it's moving a little bit more of a natural direction as that airplane would be moving. So even though this is still image, it gives us the illusion of motion. Let me go ahead and put this back to fit in window. All right, let me go ahead and just play this back at normal speed. And there you can see playing back in real time, we've got that slight motion making it more interesting. Slight motion there as well, more interesting. All right, that concludes on how to make basic changes in images and basic animation in Final Cut Express.